Well, hello, friends. Thanks for being here. Hope you're having a wonderful start to your day. Mm. Today, I am featuring a special mug from my collection, and it has to do with an homage to Italian architecture, the beautiful form and resiliency of Italian architecture, as we've seen in beautiful things like the Colosseum, the Vatican, wonderful places there, things that have withstood the test of time. So, we're going to be talking a little bit today about form and structure and the importance of that. And so, I thought today's mug would be kind of a toast to that. So, I hope you will sit back with me for a few minutes, grab a mug or a glass or of something that you are enjoying this morning. Maybe you're curling up in bed. Maybe you are somewhere across the globe and it's lunchtime where you are, or maybe you're catching this on a replay. But whatever it is that you are doing right now and how you're watching me, thanks for joining me for a few minutes. This is a little segment that I do called From the Editor's Desk on Saturday mornings. And if you've never caught any of my videos live, my name is Renee Harden, and by trade, I am an editor, content writer, a writing coach, former high school English teacher. And so I have a background in English and writing and have worked as an editor now for the last 8 years, and spent a majority of my career in the publishing or broadcasting background. So I love to share a little bit about the importance of sharing your stories and making sure that you craft your words in just the right way so that when your words go out to others, they produced a long-term effect, kind of like quality architecture does. So I'm going to take a few moments. If you're here live, make sure to pop in and say good morning. I'm going to say hi to all the friends. Good morning, Sylvia. Good to see you here, my friend. Always a pleasure to have you here on the broadcast. Good to see you. Good morning, Savannah, my beautiful daughter in Nashville, Tennessee. Hello, my sweet. Thanks for being here and always supporting me. Sherry, good to see you, my friend, in Fargo, North Dakota. Always a pleasure to have you here. Yes, and happy birthday month. So we are officially, yes, thank you so much. October is one of my favorite months of the year because it is my birthday month. And so many great things happen in October. Of course, we have the changing of the seasons. We're watching all the trees. We have trees all around our house, and so I'm watching all of the leaves starting to turn a beautiful yellow, golden color. The sunrises in the morning are beautiful when they come through those fiery colors, right? I know in Tennessee and parts of New England and the Northeast start seeing beautiful changes to the colors where you see red and orange and yellow, all of those beautiful colors. So while it is sad to say goodbye to summer, because I do love summer, fall is another great season. And October is one of the best months. So I'm going to be celebrating all month by sharing content about great things and interesting stories about those great things that have happened in the month of October, and also celebrating new book releases, because as I have mentioned before, fall is a busy season in the publishing industry because a lot of books come out and they're geared towards people giving them as gifts for Christmas. We're looking towards the beginning of the new year. If you're interested in a lot of self-help or motivational tools, if you're looking at, starting off the new year fresh and really ramping up things for your life or even your personal business, those kinds of books are going to be coming out. So I'd love to share about those. I've got some fun ones that are going to be coming out this coming Tuesday. So on Tuesdays, be sure to check this page for Tuesday new book releases, because I love to share all the news about new books that are coming out. So, how's your week been? Your week been good? Been busy? You notice about this time of year, the seasons, the time is changing, the sunlight. I know now when I get up in the morning, it is dark. It's very dark. So we know that in November, We're going to be switching back to daylight saving time. We're going to be rolling our clocks back to help us sort of adjust to the fact that we won't have as many daylight hours as we do during the summer. So the time changes to adjust for that so that we're not spending too many hours in the dark, right? Well, as I mentioned, there's going to be some interesting things come up, and I had something interesting come up this week that caused sort of a kerfluffle on my business page on Facebook. I shared some content, and it was one of the highest engaging posts I've had for a while, and it was just a picture. Just a picture. I don't understand why it caused so much kerfluffle, but it really did. And so that's going to be the topic today of our discussion, because we're going to talk about form and structure. We're going to talk about quality form and structure and why we have that, especially in our writing. I mean, can you imagine if you were to build a home, right? You would want your architect and the people working on your home to be high quality, right? You would want those people to be someone who cares about their work and who wants to do their most excellent work, and also people that use best practices in their work, right? So I'm going to share a picture with you here on screen, because this was the post that got a lot of comments and a lot of interesting engagement and some comments. And so I thought, well, today's going to be the day where we're going to talk about let's see, let me get this page up here. So hold on just a second to make sure we get the right one on screen. But yeah, it was one of the most engaging posts I've had in a while. And I thought it was interesting because there was a lot of controversy over this one post. Okay, I'm trying to get this post up on my site. Okay. All right, come on. Will you live share the right screen, if you will? Okay, I think this is it. Just making sure I've got the right one. Okay, here we go. This was the right one. So here was the post, and I had a lot of comments on the side, but it says, "Dear friends, older than 37, you don't have to put 2 spaces after the period anymore. That was for the typewriter era. You're free." Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this post had a whopping 45 people, right, engaged with it. I had so many comments. And according to my analytics, I had over 4,000 people engaged with this post. And I thought it was really interesting. And in fact, some of the, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, annoying and difficult to reverse, deeply embedded in muscle memory. My high school teacher was a real stickler for 2 spaces." A lot of comments here that people, and a lot of people saying, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to change. I'm sorry, I'm not going to change." And I tried to let people know, in the publishing industry. And in fact, one of the first things I do when I edit a manuscript, one of the very first tasks that I do when I edit is do what's called a find and replace. And I go through the entire manuscript and make sure that Word corrects all the double spaces to single spacing, because I see this all the time when I'm working on editing projects. People putting 2 spaces after a period. So if this is you, if you've done this, or this is kind of a common thing for you, go ahead and say in the comments, let me know in the comments how you feel about this, because we're going to talk a little bit about this and what it has to do with form and structure, quality, form, and structure. Because in the publishing industry, we have guidelines that we use for best practices when publishing material. We have, it's a set of standards. I know that in several industries, in construction, in carpentry, in accounting, In all kinds of industries, they have best practices. These are tried and true things that they use as an industry standard. Well, this one is such a stickler for people. I've edited manuscripts where people have gone back through and put the spaces back in, and I try to tell them, this goes to publishing. The first thing that's going to flag is that it has this problem, and it will not print until you fix it. And then there are the people who they just want to put it out there like that and they don't care. Well, that's fine, except for the fact that your book is going to be seen as something outdated, right? Now, there are those in the fashion industry. I know my daughter and I were talking about this weekend, that we're seeing trends and fashions come back from years ago, like the 70s, right? Well, let me explain to you a little bit why fashion comes back, but there are some things that even in the 70s, because I lived in the 70s, I didn't even like the fashion then. So to see it come back 40 years later, hoping to revive some newfound love for an outdated and kind of odd fashion style as the standard. If you want to personally do that, and that's your quirky little way, and you love to wear bell-bottom jeans, and that's all of a sudden a new trend now is bell-bottom jeans. Okay, that's fine. However, does it look good on you? If it looks good on you and you feel great, wonderful. That's clothing. We're not talking about clothing. We're talking about publishing standards. So what I thought I would do today is share a little bit about why it's important to follow industry guidelines, because if you're going to publish a book, if you want to get your stories out there, you want to make sure that you are following industry standards, because if you don't, they're going to flag it. And some publishers won't even publish you. So why this thing about 2 spaces after a period? We don't do it. We don't do 2 spaces after a period. We only do one space. Well, let me explain a little bit about that, okay? Because this has to do when a lot of people were like, well, I don't understand. When did this start? I've always been doing it. In fact, I remember my typing teacher in high school in the late 70s drilled us on 2 spaces after a period, 2 spaces after a period. She would tap her ruler and say, 2 spaces after a period, 2 spaces after a period. And so we did that. However, that went out in the 70s. So this has to do with something that I'm going to explain that's called proportional versus monospace typesetting. Okay, so if you, and I'm so glad that I was able to find this picture and put it on the screen, because I want you to take a look at the size and width of the character spacing in where it says monospace and then proportional. You notice that the I and the L are not as wide as the E or the P under them, right? It has to do with spacing of fonts in typesetting, right? When we used to typeset things manually with metal plates. And so monospace typesetting was standard. So mechanical systems that were introduced during the end of the 19th century, such as linotype or monotype machines. If you know what a linotype, or some people call them linotype machines, they allowed for variable spacing similar to hand composition, right? With handwriting. I don't know about you, but my letters when I write are kind of fatter than other people, the way they write with smaller letters. So the introduction of these machines at the end of the 19th century really revolutionized the mass production of text. In other words, things that were being printed and distributed, right? So these machines were helpful in getting that done. And the advent of the typewriter around the same time as these, other machines helped revolutionize the creation of personal and business documents, right? Now, The typewriter's mechanical limitations did not allow for variable spacing, right? The plates on the typewriter, you've seen if you have a typewriter, right? I'm talking about the manual typewriter with the keys that went up, right? And even the electric typewriters that had the font balls, those fonts were interchanged, right? And you would have Courier, which is a wider space, versus, say, Times New Roman, which is a more horizontal space. So these typewriters did not allow for variable spacing, and typists in some English-speaking countries could only choose the number of times they pressed the space bar. So typists in some English-speaking countries initially learned to insert 3 spaces between sentences. Imagine how much white space that would produce on a page if you had 3 to 4 spaces after a period, okay? Because in traditional spacing, you had to allow for wider spaced fonts. Well, that practice continued on into the 20th century, and this became known as English spacing, which was different from French spacing, which was only 1. Now, let's fast forward to the early 20th century. Some printers began using 1.5 interword spaces, something called an enquad, which was to separate the sentences. This all has to do with typography and typesetting. So this standard was continued in use up until like the 1990s. So magazines, newspapers, and books began to adopt the single space convention in the United States in the 1940s, and it was adopted in the UK in the 50s. So this is single spacing after period has been around for a very long time. It's just a matter of people learning it and knowing it and using it. So typists, imagine, around the globe did not just automatically go, oh, okay, we're going to use single spacing, okay? Because the average writer still relied on a typewriter. Some people did not have these machines in their homes. In fact, we didn't even have, right? You remember when computers first came out, and we didn't have personal home computers until, the Mac was brought in, and all of a sudden people had computers at home. So in 1941, IBM introduced the Executive. It was a typewriter that was capable of proportional spacing, right? Oh, I have to point this way. What? This way. There we go. This way. There we go. Proportional spacing at top. So we had an electric typewriter that finally allowed for proportional spacing. Now, the innovation broke the hold that the monospaced font had on the typewriter, reducing the severity of its mechanical limitations. But this innovation did not spread throughout the typewriter industry. In fact, the majority of mechanical typewriters, including all of the widely distributed models, remained monospaced, while a small minority of special models carried the innovations. So by the 1960s, electronic photo typesetting systems, they ignored the runs of white space in the text. So you have all these gaps, big old chunks of white space within the text. This also happened on the web, on the internet. As people started looking at text on the internet, you would notice a lot of white space. Now, in the 1980s, desktop publishing software provided writers with the advantage to have formatting tools. So all of a sudden now we had a way to take that text and format it if we wanted it more justified. You notice with monospace, everything is the same, so it's very blocked, right? And especially if you're justifying a page, it looked really great. But desktop publishing software allowed writers and publishers and printers to now use proportional spacing. And so by the late 20th century, literature on the written word began to adjust its guide on single spacing. So a lot of books about it. In 1954, Jeffrey Downing's book, Finer Points in the Spacing and Arrangement of Type, underscored the widespread shift from a single enlarged, what they called M space, which was the larger spacing at the top, and encouraged people to use standard word space, which was just a single space between sentences. Now, With the advent of computers, this changed a lot of things, and typographers began deprecating double spacing, even within monospaced text. In 1989, Desktop Publishing by Design, this is a book entitled Desktop Publishing by Design, it stated that typesetting requires only one space after periods, question marks, exclamation points, and colons. And it identified single sentence spacing as the typographic convention. Now, books like Stop Stealing Sheep and Find Out How Type Works, and the book Designing with Type, it's the Essential Guide to Typography, which came out in 2006, both indicate that uniform spacing should be used between words. So here we have standards being changed, and yet that go back to like the 70s. But yet people are insistent. In fact, if you look in some of the comments that I have in the section, they are insistent, in fact, saying that, well, the published industry is wrong in using single spacing. And of course, these are, I know, working in the publishing industry, what the standards are when publishers want to publish a book. And that's why, as an editor, why you hire an editor, because you want your book looked over to make sure that it is following within standard publishing guidelines, right? So when typewriters used monospaced type, that means every character took up an equal amount of horizontal space. So you had problems with, if you imagine if the word proportional was typed in monospace font, you would have big gaps where the I or the L was, but then you had the letter W, which was wider. So you would have these gaps in between even the letters, which looked a little strange. So monospace type gives you a look that is loose or uneven. There's a lot of white space there. What proportional fonts do is provide that clean, seamless look between letters to make sure that it reads easier. So when typewriters were used and monospace typing was done, that was more about having that white space, and that's where the two-space rule came from, was to indicate, because of all the white space in the lettering, it was to indicate where the sentence ended, so it created a lot of white space gap, right? So then you bring in PCs. We have PCs now. We have personal computers, home computers with software that allows you, and they all use proportional fonts. So today, nearly every font on your computer, unless you're using Courier. So you can try this out. Open up a page, like a document page, and type and choose Courier as your font and type some letters, and then pick another font and type the same letters and notice the difference in spacing, because every font on your computer now uses proportional spacing. So because we've switched to using modern fonts, that's why we no longer use double spacing at the end of a period. It's an industry standard. And I don't want your work going out there looking funky. So one of the first things I do, I go through and do a find and replace, and I remove all of those extra spaces to give your text a readability and a flow. And that's one of just the first things that I do. Then I go through and I look for things like passive voice. Is there a better way to use this? Is there a better word choice? Are your sentences clear and concise? Are they conveying the ideas that you want to convey? How can your readers enjoy this without getting, droning on or losing sense of what it is you're trying to tell them? That's what an editor does. So an editor helps make your books look better, and we're going to do it even with spacing, because even though you may, and it's okay. I tell people, go ahead, type. If you want to do it, if you want to put it in your posts, that's fine. Remember that you're dating yourself. And as someone who is older, and I want to stay relevant, I don't want to stay stuck in the past. There are things about the past that I love. There are clothing styles that I love, but I have to get rid of some of my outfits because they just don't fit or look the same. They make you look dated and old, and I don't want to look dated and old, and I don't especially want any of my clients looking dated and old. And work with a writing style that went out 40 years ago. Why would you want to do that, right? So that's the little publishing industry faux pas that causes a lot of kerfluffle every time. I can tell you that this is an issue. It comes up a lot with people that I work with. I try to explain it to them as best I can. Hopefully they will understand, but if you want your books published, it will go through that. And publishers especially will go through your text and do that if you submit your book to them for publication. Because they're not, with their name on it, they're not going to put something out there that looks dated or obsolete. And so just trying to help you put your best stories out there. And that's what I love to do as well. So speaking of best stories, here are a couple of books that I'm really excited about that are coming out. And a lot of times there's some other ones coming out. So like I said, follow my page on Tuesday because I'm going to be sharing some new book releases. So here's some that are coming up on Tuesday that I'm really excited about. If you are familiar with Amor Towles, he wrote the book A Gentleman in Moscow. His new one is coming out, and it is called The Lincoln Highway, right? The Lincoln Highway. So this has been highly anticipated by people. My friends at Interrobang Books, one of the gentlemen there that works with fiction told me, he said, "Oh, excellent book. You're going to want one." So I've already pre-ordered it. I can't wait. It's going to be released on Tuesday. I'm going to pick it up on Tuesday. It's going to be an excellent release. Amor Towles' writing style is fantastic. So you'll definitely want to check that one out. And this will be a great gift, especially if you have people who read A Gentleman in Moscow. You will definitely want to pick this copy up for them and give it to them as a gift, perhaps. Another great book that is coming out, and this is for any music fans out there. If you have friends who are fans of the Foo Fighters, do you know of anyone? Do you have friends that are Foo Fighter fans, right? And I don't know if you saw the recent videos that the Foo Fighters did a show with a little girl who is a drumming like prodigy, and she actually played with the band at one of their shows. Which I thought was just fantastic. But Dave Grohl, the lead singer of the Foo Fighters, formerly of the band Nirvana, has his own book coming out, and it's called The Storyteller, Tales of Life and Music. I'm really looking forward to this one. I have a couple of friends who I know are big Foo Fighter fans, so they're getting a copy of this sent to them. But this is a great book. It's coming out on Tuesday, Dave Grohl's life, where he took the time and he wanted to write about life on the road, being in the band Nirvana, sharing some of his personal stories, and doing so in just a very honest and revealing manner. So I've already read a couple of excerpts from it. It looks fantastic. And I've never been a big Foo Fighters fan. I loved Nirvana. Foo Fighters, I have to be in the right mood to listen to their music. But his storytelling is top notch. So if you know someone who is a Foo Fighters fan, definitely want to get a copy of this book. So like I said, watch my page here. I love to share Tuesday new releases with you here. The industry drops a lot of books on Tuesdays. That tends to be an industry standard date for releasing new books. So you'll definitely want to watch my page because I love sharing all the new books that are coming out. Those are just two of many that are going to be coming out on Tuesday. So kind of watch my page for that. And more importantly, today marks the start of me actually announcing the book club pick for October. I am super excited about this one. This is a book that I have taught many times in class when I was a high school teacher, but I love to teach this book because this book, Utopia, written by Sir Thomas More in the 1500s, set the tone and defined an entire genre of literature, and yet he never lived long enough to know that. So what if our world could actually change? What if there were some rules or maybe some policies or things, because, we're watching our political system right now banter back and forth about what should be done and what should be funded and how much money we should be spending and how much our national debt is. But what if we could change some rules, like truly affect real change? And sometimes people think that the changes that they want to institute, oh, that's going to work for everybody. But does it really? Does it really? And so in this story, Utopia, we're going to go into a country, a place where the rules are very different from what we know. And yet in their society, it seems to work. But there are underlying principles why they work, which probably could never really be affected in the United States or in any country around the world. But some of the principles about what Thomas More puts forth in this book could actually work. Maybe they could work, or maybe they seem so shocking to you, and yet they work within a utopian society. What is a utopian society? What does that mean? And what is dystopian, right? We have utopian and we have dystopian, two completely opposite types of societies. Well, we're going to talk about all of this and more in this month's book club. So if you want to get involved in the book club, I highly recommend it. The book is only 85 pages, so it's an easy read. And in fact, you could find the text online because it is in the public domain. But the way I try to approach studying this book is because there's a lot in the book to digest. So you're going to want to read it in stages and discuss it with a group of people to see what their thoughts are. Well, that's what we do in the book club. We look at all the interesting aspects of a written work and we discuss them. So if you want to get involved in the book club, now is a great time to join. We're starting this brand new book. Like I said, 85 pages. You can do that in a month, right? But you can join right now. You can go to roneharden.com/contact. Make sure you check the box for Through the Pages Book Club, and you can get all the details and info and emails that I'll be sending out about our new book club read. Excuse me. You can also find out more about me, join my newsletter, and find out about all the interesting things like the new books that are coming out. I love to send that information out to my friends. So if you want to find out more about that, check it out. You can also find any of my live broadcasts like the one you're seeing here on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/RoneHarden. So thanks for joining me, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend part of your weekend here with me. Remember, one space, not two. And we'll be reading our new book and getting started with that really soon. And as always, washing everything down with a great cup of coffee. I'm tearing up. I'm so grateful that you were here with me this morning. And guys, thanks so much again. Always a pleasure to sit down and have some coffee with you, share thoughts and information. And if you have questions about publishing, like, do I use two spaces or one? How do I get self-published if I really want to publish a book? How do I approach an agent or a publisher if I want to take my story to them? What does it cost? What's involved? Or if you don't have any money, how do you get your work published? What does that actually mean? Because published doesn't necessarily mean going to an agency and having your work published. There's lots of different outlets and ways that you can publish your book, but we'll talk about that next week. All right. So guys, thanks so much for joining me. As always, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Make sure you sign up for the book club. Okay. And my newsletter. Let me know how I can help you. If you have any questions about your book, if you have any questions about getting your work out there, or even getting started and you just want to find out more about how to get started writing your story, let me know. That's what I'm here for. I'd love to help you out and get your stories out there because, again, stories can change the world. I know Utopia did, right? Oh, I'm going to learn how to point correctly in this. But Thomas More never knew that movies like The Hunger Games or Divergent or The Maze Runner would ever be written inspired by what he wrote. So let's find out what it is that he wrote that inspired not only so many writers and people to try and explore some of the thoughts and concepts he had in his book, but let's try to see if we can figure out why he even came up with this idea to begin with, right? So the book club, Utopia, you'll want to check it out. And I hope you'll be back here next weekend as we talk more about what does it mean to be published, right? I'll help you out with that and more. But thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you back here next weekend.